to be following the video and John's report. It couldn't be more exciting with what's happening in terms of the people's struggle. It's what you live and dream for. Now, just to also say, can anyone here believe it's 2 weeks? It's just 2 weeks since the inauguration. I mean, so much has happened. I can't even really begin in this report to summarize what Trump has done and what the people's response has been. Neither have we ever seen, I don't think, in my lifetime. And it's just beginning. This is 2 weeks in. So, and just to say something first, because I think we do have to begin with this incredible response at the airports. I mean, it's an ideological, it is a political blow to Trump in a big way, It is people expressing solidarity in a way that we haven't seen and we need to see so much more of. But so for the struggle to unroll in a way like this with people taking direct action, I think there were 44 different airport actions. It backed up air traffic around the world. You know, when you close down LAX, that impacts all of Asia. You shut down Dulles, JFK, Chicago Airport, Boston, down to Charlotte. Just think how that rolls all over the world. And they shut it down themselves by barring so many Muslims just from coming into the country. And we should be aware there's 500,000 people outside the U.S. at this point who have green cards, just the green cards, which means they have permanent legal residency in the U.S. and can't come home. They have families. So just think how many millions of people right here in the U.S. that this impacts, who suddenly, how does a student, a family member, a breadwinner with a job come back? It creates enormous hardship. And the fact that people got that and took these actions, it's really a high watermark. And a big rebuff, because everything, if you think since 9/11, everything in the war on terror is all talking, it's building up Islamophobia every single day. So in a mass way, that was rejected. And it really is the antidote to the horrors we're seeing this week. And I can't even promise to summarize all of them. There was, and we want to make distinctions too as to who's doing what, because the corporate press will build up some of the resistance as if that represents the people. So Trump on Monday night, after all of these airport actions, he fired the acting attorney general of the U.S., Sally Q. Yates, for refusing to defend his executive order. She was a holdover from the Obama administration. And her refusing to bar refugees and travelers from the 7 Muslim countries was cause for her firing. Now even that violates every bourgeois norm, because supposedly, and we could think back to the Watergate struggles and whatnot, the Attorney General is supposed to be somewhat independent of the executive, but that just went out the window too. But the opposition of Yates as Assistant Attorney General, and also there are a whole series of State Department resignations. I mean, they just rolled on, as a matter of fact. But we should distinguish that they aren't acting in solidarity with the immigrants. What are State Department officials? They spend their whole careers thinking how to defend the interests of U.S. imperialism, how to get their hooks in countries around the world. But they also are completely, the complete unraveling of all sorts of U.S. imperialist alliances, trade, and so on, has them pulling out their hair, and they're jumping ship. But we're just to know what's motivating them and what's different. And when they're elevated as this, when State Department officials resign, these are forces of liberation. No, they're not. They are part of the imperialist establishment in the most profound way. And we want to make that distinction again and again in everything that's going on. But probably one of the most interesting things this week, and we'll be hearing much more about this, is what on earth is Stephen Bannon, really the most arch right-wing fascist force, doing on the National Security Council. Now, what's the National Security Council? It's really the executive committee of the entire military-industrial complex. It's where the generals get together, where the war criminals get together. It even has a secret assassination panel. So that tells you a lot about the mentality of these forces. But there's a big shakeup there. And to name this proto-fascist, who was Trump's chief political strategist and the former head of the alt-right Breitbart News, he's a white supremacist in every sense of the word. And he makes no shame about it, no bones about it. I mean, he's right out there in the open with all the filth and the slime. So naming him to the National Security Council is a big deal. And he actually even overruled the Department of Homeland Security's decision, but they wanted to exempt the green card holders from Trump's executive order. So it just shows they're not even all together on how to proceed in this struggle. So he got a permanent seat on the National Security Council, and who got pushed to the side was the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. And so here you have Dunford being downgraded and told that he can only attend meetings when he's invited. And this is also true with the Director of National Intelligence. And in the meantime, the National Security Council is going to be led by Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Now Flynn, even by military standards, is considered a complete kook. I mean, it's how he put out tweets that Hillary Clinton was actually running a child sex in D.C. at a pizza place. Right, that was one of Flynn's quotes. I mean, just think, this is, National Security Council. So there's kind of strange things afoot. He also said that Clinton was involved in a secret war against the Catholic Church, and I mean, all kinds of. We could go on. I won't go into all his tweets, but at any rate, he's not one of the more rational members of the U.S. Establishment. So, what's been the response of the Democrats? See, this goes back to the State Department resignations, because they're not fighting this real nightmare scenario. They actually voted for Mad Dog Mattis. Now, Mad Dog Mattis, he's going to be the Secretary of Defense. He is really a war criminal. We could go on in what he did in Fallujah in Iraq, where there were 4 U.S. mercenaries who were killed, and they leveled the city. They used firebombing and depleted uranium, and one of Mattis's famous quotes is, "It's fun to shoot people." So this is the mentality of who's Trump's Secretary of Defense. Just think about that for a minute. But also think about what it means when Chuck Schumer, who spoke, on Sunday down at Battery Park, is considered a liberal Democrat, right here from New York, votes for him. Now, he could have opposed, he could have walked out, he could have made a statement, even if he thought he would be defeated. Why not do something? Why not say something? Why not say, this is outrageous, I refuse to accept it? Why not expose his career and his history? Why not take a minute to use his platform and describe who Mattis is? There's somebody else who voted for Mad Dog Mattis. Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
So it really shows a complete capitulation on the part of the Democratic Party and those who supposedly represent something else, and who are claiming at this point to be in opposition. It's why it's so important that we need a people's opposition from below, because these forces may talk one talk, but really when they're right there, and they are in a position to actually speak and block. I mean, they could block it with their bodies, they could block it with their mouths, but no. Now, they also voted for Trump's Homeland Security Secretary Kelly, who immediately, the airport cops, he was willing to violate, there's a court ruling to stop this. Make no difference, he rolls right on ahead. Now that's another precedent in terms of the bourgeois norms that we're used to thinking about. Like a court order had some impact, a federal judge saying something has some impact. But now it's like, doesn't matter. We're just going to do what we're going to do, and the police agencies are in charge. Now, I want to also mention the Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch. Turns out he headed for 4 years, this wasn't just a passing fancy, he headed for 4 years a club called Fascism Forever Club when he was a student, at Georgetown Prep, really very fancy, very expensive prep school. So you should believe people when they say things about themselves. When Stephen Bannon says he's Darth Vader, that's evil incarnate from Star Wars, right? When he calls himself Darth Vader, we should believe it. We should believe it. There's a lot of fascist slime who are actually crawling out from under the rocks that they usually hide under. There's a whole military apparatus, right? There's a whole repressive police apparatus. There's 18 different intelligence agencies. I mean, there's a lot that's really, and it hides a lot of real fascist forces. They're like climbing out from under those rocks into broad daylight and proud of and proclaiming their credentials. Now, Trump is doing some other things. Here's a really incredible thing today. For a lot of people who thought that somehow he would reach an understanding with Russia and he'd be against wars, he had a phone call with the Mexican president where he threatened to send U.S. troops to Mexico. Unless the Mexican military controls the bad hombres down there. I mean, you really have to think how insulting this is, how racist this is, and how absolutely over the top as a way for, the president to even be dealing with the head of state of another country. To pick up the phone and say, well, we're thinking of sending the U.S. military in. Oh, right, same thing. Australia, the president of Australia hung up the phone after insulting him. So there's a new way of doing business, and it's sending shockwaves, and it's actually creating a great deal of disarray in the ruling class and the whole ruling establishment, and that's not so bad. It can be very dangerous too. Now, there were a lot of people who thought that maybe Trump was going to reach a new understanding with Russia, right? And supposedly a pullback on the Cold War that was roiling. But today, UN Security Council, the U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley announced that the sanctions on Russia, U.S. sanctions on Russia, would continue indefinitely. They were imposed in 2014. They were imposed over the annexation of Crimea. The U.S. tried to grab it through NATO, and Russia preempted that action. And the U.S. imposed sanctions. And so suddenly the U.S. ambassador has announced that, in fact, sanctions won't be ending on Russia. They'll remain in place until that peninsula, that base, is handed over to NATO. So All of this, and there's many other examples I could raise. There's many other examples I could raise because so much is happening by executive order, by appointments. But what's more important is the level of resistance around the country. And it is taking many different forms. Along with the airport actions, just to say, the number of city councils literally around the country feeling the pressure from the people who are voting sanctuary city status. Now that's important because when they pass a resolution, such as in Birmingham, Alabama, you wouldn't think a city council resolution saying that they will not allow the police to become a federal arm of immigration enforcement. Unanimous resolution. Now, the struggle takes other forms, which was also referred to. There was, the media is calling it a riot in Berkeley, at the UC Berkeley last night, against the real facts. Jan Opoulos, I hope I pronounce, I don't care if I pronounce that name right, but at any rate, protesters, and they were armed, they had bricks, they had fireworks. That was the most interesting. They assaulted the building where he was due to speak, and there were thousands of participants, and they shut it down. Now, he is Breitbart News editor and a real white supremacist, a really vicious slime. And here's, by the way, what he tweeted as he escaped the building. He said, "I've been evacuated from UC Berkeley campus after violent left-wing protesters tore down barricades, lit fires, threw rocks and Roman candles at the windows, breached the ground floor of the building. My team and I are safe, but the event was canceled." Now, this pressure from below, see, it impacts not just the city councils, it can impact even the police departments. San Francisco Police Department has announced that they're suspending their participation with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Now, that doesn't remake the police, not even for a hot minute, but we should know that that is people pressure. That's what people's power is. That is what people's power is. When there is an action where thousands of people participate and shut down a campus, then others take notice. Now, just to say another form of struggle, and it impacts corporate USA. There are thousands of Comcast employees in Philadelphia who streamed out of the Comcast Center this afternoon, I think it was, to protest Trump's executive order on Muslim immigrants. They had a police escort, 2 p.m., not that they needed it, they were walking out, and they carried signs, "Tech has no borders." Very kind of simple sign, but it was the sheer number of tech workers who are impacted by the ban, can't even return to jobs, family members. And it grew far beyond Philadelphia. There were employees, of course, in Westchester, in New York, and Washington, and Silicon Valley, who also, hearing about this, are taking part in the walkout. And it's grown from, it was originally a dozen employees, it grew like that to 1,000 and then more. Now, it had a rather surprising thing. We should keep this in mind when people call for a shutdown, a walkout, a stay away. Comcast, and they're Trump supporters, am I right? I think they were actually, they funded, anyway. They announced that Comcast would pay the employees for their time. They would pay as if they were going to the doctor. It's a paid time policy they have. Now, that really shows pressure. Because you don't get paid time from any boss from a walkout unless they want to be sure you're coming back in. So I could go on and on about these things. Let's talk about the Super Bowl this Sunday. We're both from whether it's New England Patriots or the Atlanta Falcons, both and important players on both teams have announced they're not going to the White House based on who wins. But even more important, see, it's taking place in Houston.
Yeah.
And you start to learn things about the political and demographic geography of the U.S. that you may not have known. We may have one image of Houston, but it turns out that more than 20% of Houston are immigrants and recent immigrants. And Houston has the most progressive policy of any city in the country in accepting refugees. And it is become a real part of the culture in Houston. So, of course, at the airport, they shut it down. They certainly did. The George Bush International Airport. What a great building to shut down that was, right? But they have some events planned for the Super Bowl. They're going to be at both the gates. They're going to have a banner flying over the city, over the stadium. They have all different things that are visuals that we might be seeing. We know that Lady Gaga is doing the halftime show. I'm sure there'll be some interesting things happening there also. And what has galvanized so much of the city was one 16-year-old high school student who was held in Chicago and detained all week from returning and had been visiting family in Jordan. And this became really a cause célèbre. No access to his cell phone, no access to family. It shows in the smallest way the things that really impact people and that they're responding to. Now, today, and I think folks have just come here from it, Yemeni bodegas, those are the small grocery stores, shut down, and there are many of these small grocery stores, 1,000 small grocery stores in New York are Yemeni owned, and they shut down. And there was a rally of about 3,000 Yemenis at Borough Hall tonight. I think I want to say also something on the, and hopefully we'll get a report. There's some folks who are at NYU. Let's see, bottom one. Oh God, my time is up. All right, I'll just say a couple of small things on the signs because some of the things you really kind of relate to. There's a famous slogan in Nazi Germany. First they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't a trade unionist. And first they came for the communists. I wasn't a communist. Next they came for the trade unionists. Next they came for the Jews. One of the signs said, they came for the Muslims, ... Not this time, motherfucker. Another sign I saw that kind of, I'm Jewish. I know where this is going. Now that was in response to, today, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And Trump actually gave a talk that didn't mention the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust. And then they defended the statement. I mean, made it clear this wasn't an omission. See, this was a political decision. And then this, one of the most vicious of the white supremacists who's big on Twitter, Richard Spencer, spent the day praising Trump for not mentioning in his statement the 6 million Jews who were slaughtered in the Holocaust. So this is also, they want to make it clear it isn't only against the Muslims, against black people, against immigrants. This is across the board. And it will draw a response, too. It will draw a response. Now, it draws a response even from the most oppressed, and I want to end on this. There was a very courageous prison uprising yesterday that really Vaughan Prison, Smyrna, Delaware, and I know this prison. It's huge. It's just like rows in the middle of nowhere, huge fields, and you just go through one gate after another, wall after another. Huge towers, holds 2,500 prisoners. The news media said they took 4 hostages. We got to be clear, every one of those 2,500 are hostages. They're hostages of the class struggle. And the immediate response from our comrades in both Philadelphia and Baltimore was to mobilize to go to that prison. It's really incredible and short notice and dangerous because it also galvanized the right wing to come out and threaten them, the police agencies, the state. And we don't know what's happened with those inside. But we can imagine, because we know how terrible the prisons are to begin with. But the prisoners, in this uprising, they said, conditions are unbearable, and we know with Trump, they'll be worse. So it was a political uprising. And our defense, even if it wasn't, it's so important to go and defend. There was a press conference held right there today from Baltimore, from Philly, comrades, and from local activists who spoke at the press conference. One was a prisoner who'd just recently been released from 39 years in this prison. Imagine the courage it took to speak, knowing, then highlighted, targeted. Another prisoner who'd just been released. 2 family members, 2 mothers who had their sons inside. And the call, and it was really resonating from them, was for an independent commission of inquiry into the causes and into the demands of the prisoners. So we want to be part of every exciting and confrontational action, but we also, when the most oppressed, under the most onerous and difficult conditions, rise up. And the prison in Smyrna is absolutely that. We want to come to the defense. We're also releasing just today a petition in support of and calling for drop all the charges of the more than 200 activists who were arrested in Washington at the counter-inaugural action. Now, we held a very successful action. It was remarkable, and the security was strong, and the front line was tight. It was tight all along the way, and it actually reached its goal, and even within sight of the White House, a block away. But that doesn't mean we're going to say, oh, it's all right to attack some other group who's demonstrating. And the support hasn't been strong enough on this, and we want to push that forward to say drop all the charges, every one of those resistors, and there were also legal observers and medical people and all that, people walking down the street, journalists, that's right, all kinds of people who shouldn't be. They may get their charges dropped, but how about the activists? How about those with some previous charges on their record?
Right.
No, we got to defend all of them. And we got to get the whole movement behind that demand to drop all the charges. Now, I'm just going to end with saying that to do all this, we need the resources, material resources, cadre resources, militancy, determination, social network, a whole series of things to continue this struggle in the next stage. And the most important thing we need is an understanding of our own power. An understanding that people's power, not elections, with either of the capitalist parties, not belief in one official or another, but belief in our own power, our own ability to change history, to push back reaction, to really take on the capitalist state. That's what we need the confidence in. So I think we're off to a good start. 2 weeks in to Trump, people are up for this struggle.